February 1895. The U.S.'s preeminent banker, John Pierpont Morgan, took a train from New York City to Washington, D.C. He was to meet with the president, the Democrat Grover Cleveland, a fellow New Yorker, about a highly sensitive matter. The United States was broke. In 1895, money was backed by gold, and the country's gold was hemorrhaging to Europe. The American dollar was about to collapse, and with it, faith in America's monetary system. Only Morgan could round up the gold necessary to bail out the United States government. In the end, Morgan did save the U.S.'s monetary system, making a decent profit for himself in the process. President Grover Cleveland, on the other hand, didn't fare so well. For many Americans, his meeting with Morgan signaled that something was seriously wrong with America. Why did the government have to go hat in hand to the bankers for a bailout? Who really held the power in this country? In the next year's presidential election, Cleveland's Democratic Party nominated William Jennings Bryan. Bryan promised to get America off the gold standard in favor of bimetallism, a hybrid gold and silver standard. In his words, he would not crucify Americans on a cross of gold. With that promise, Bryan was assured the support of Western farmers. For over a decade, farmers had fought to get rid of the gold standard. They saw it as a tool of bankers like Morgan to keep them in debt. They fought for government regulation of railroads, a national income tax, and a fair voting process. They wanted to combat the power of money with the power of people. They formed a political party, the Populist Party, where farmers of all stripes were accepted, black and white, immigrant and native-born. Race didn't matter because all farmers belonged to the same class. They won control of local and state governments in the West. In the presidential election of 1892, they won 5% of the electoral vote. And now, in 1896, one of the two main political parties had taken up their cause. The populists were turning into a national force. But this also blunted their edge. Rather than shaking up the two-party system, they became a part of it. Now they had to compromise with other members of the Democratic Party, members who weren't as keen on challenging the wealthy classes. Working with Democrats also meant they had to abandon the racial unity that made them so effective, since the Democrats was the party of Southern racists. In the end, Bryan lost the election of 1896 to Republican William McKinley, a manservant of the wealthy. McKinley beat Bryan again in 1900. The populists bet on the Democratic Party and lost. Such is the fate of many potentially subversive movements in the United States. They go from threatening the system to being co-opted by it. They go from bearing their claws to being declawed. The populists had tried to solve the problems of what the writer Mark Twain called the Gilded Age. Gilded refers to something that looks golden and shiny on the outside, but is rotten at its core. The Industrial Revolution created wondrous advancements and millionaires who profited from them. It also created widespread misery for those who lived by their labor, whether they were farmers or factory workers. Both groups had their cheerleaders. The millionaires had British philosopher Herbert Spencer. Spencer believed the capitalist system was a competition between individuals. The most capable individuals succeeded. Everyone else failed. In his words, it was survival of the fittest. This was a bastardized interpretation of Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection, which is why it's called social Darwinism. Farmers and workers actively worked against this idea. In a competition between individuals, they would be crushed every single time. No single laborer could hope to stand up to any single millionaire. Instead of working as individuals, they tried to unite as a class. Farmers had the Populist Party. Industrial workers had labor unions. Only strength in numbers could shield them from the power of wealth. This also led many working people to gravitate to ideas of socialism and communism. If the working classes could take control of business or government, if they could take control over the means of production, in the words of Karl Marx, they could correct some of the worst abuses of the Gilded Age. Social Darwinists feared what would happen if the working people gained sway over the government. They could change the rules of the capitalist system so that idiots and wastrels would be favored. The best, most able people would be deprived of their position of leadership in the economy. The human race would suffer as a result. The watchword of the social Darwinists was laissez-faire, a French term that loosely translates to leave them be, popularized by the Scottish philosopher Adam Smith. It meant the government had a duty to leave the economy be and let the rule of perfect competition, the rule of nature in the minds of social Darwinists, run its course. In short, socialists pin their hopes on people acting collectively, and social Darwinists pin their hopes on people acting as individuals. William McKinley's victory in 1896 looked like a victory for social Darwinism and individualism. But a new movement was already taking shape, one that struck a middle ground between collective action and individualism: Progressivism.